Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in. Hello everyone. So this time we're going to delve into the topic of multi-cloud and the realities of building a multi-cloud strategy in today's world. And today I am joined by Darren from Nutanix. Darren, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone?
So I'm Darren Woollard, Field CTO for UK and Ireland at Nutanix. It's my job to support all of our customers and tackle all the very challenging IT situations that they find themselves in nowadays, and really looking forward to catching up on this podcast.
Excellent. Thanks, Darren. So for everyone, we're going to break this into three parts as we usually do. First part, we're going to talk about transformation, cloud repatriation, talk a little bit about the elephant in the hypervisor room that we have today. In the second part, we're going to talk about what is it like to build a cloud today and where can you get them capabilities in different platforms. And in the third piece, then, we're going to dig into what the futures, what will be in Darren seeing and what do we think could be coming down the line. So let's get into it. So Darren, part one here, so we're going to talk about transformation. I mean, that is quite a broad topic, but we've got a few themes to pull out of this. But before we get to the themes, what do you view as that word transformation, and what are you seeing from your conversations with customers that word actually mean?
Really good question, and it means something different to anybody, definitely based on the size of the organisation. That's key here as well. For some, it's physical, as in equipment's old, ageing, consolidating it down, benefits of maybe the new technology, CPU, RAM and disk, squashing it all down, smaller footprint. So really good instant cost savings there. From the other side, it's maybe organisational changes, mergers, acquisitions, anything like that that's come along and directed the business drivers for their customer base. So it's very much twofold. Now, we sit in both camps, and clearly some are technically solved and some are business, and we can kind of talk about those bits possibly later on. But that's pretty much, I would say in a nutshell, how we're seeing things today.
No, that makes sense. Like I say, that size of organisation is a really important part of that conversation, because transformation is different for everybody. And then we've been, as CW, trying to get away from using just digital transformation as a term, and more your transformation. And what that means to you could be app modernisation, could be data centre modernisation, could be workload migration. It very much depends on what's driving your business outcomes at the end of the day. But the Nutanix conversation over the last 10, 15 years, whatever the span is now, generally, historically, been a HCI conversation, but we were talking offline about that's really matured now and isn't necessarily the conversation you're seeing a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, HCI is, it's kind of question. I had a conversation with a colleague. Could you kind of question that it's, I think dead's maybe a bit brutal, because it's always going to be there as an underlying architecture, but it's just accepted now. Gartner even squashed the whole magic quadrant for HCI. That doesn't exist anymore. It's just accepted as being normal. And as an architecture, when we think about HCI, it runs all the big cloud providers, all the hyperscalers run the same architecture. So we used to lead with this as Nutanix. It was a thing for us. We started in 2011 as a kind of a VDI company. People put us in that, pigeonhole us into that, because we had a distributed file system. I'm sure you must probably remember all that. But that's all changed now. And so I find it's a very different conversation. Nutanix doesn't pitch itself as a HCI company because we do so much more. And we're going to talk about bits around that. And so some of you on listen to this podcast know we are so much more as well. So that HCI thing I think it's just accepted now, and we don't need to kind of labour that. I don't know your thoughts on that.
No, 100%. It's a building block of a larger multi-cloud architecture, effectively, and I think that's where it's been great to see that evolution of the market in general from yourselves and the other players in the space, as moving away just from a platform to an overall ecosystem that helps manage that multi-cloud environment from that side. But I guess one of the points though is the hypervisor conversation from that side of it. Where do you run workloads? And there's two themes I think we've picked out from this. One is that cloud repatriation, bringing things back on-prem conversation. And the second one is that the elephant in every room when we get to the hypervisor conversation in 2024 due to the Broadcom acquisition piece. So Focusing on the cloud return piece, how much of them conversations are you seeing, Darren, and what is it that's driving them from your perspective? Why are people talking about repatriation or whatever the word we want to use is?
Yeah, coming back on site, repatriation, the exit strategies, and all these other phrases. I would say I want to come back to the hypervisor bit just briefly, but just to answer the first question, people have made the choice to go to cloud in some way in the early days. And that was, we'd all heard the kind of cloud first, cloud initiatives, these things maybe being decided on golf courses rather than actually involving the business. And it was well, we're definitely going to public cloud. Years ago, these were the phrases that the big C-levels were saying. However, all it was doing was moving an existing infrastructure of workloads, clearly virtualized, not the physical side initially, and just moving them to somebody else's data center with a different billing methodology, but ultimately it's just a lift and shift. And now what's happened is those costs have spiraled, things got out of control, maybe the skill sets aren't there. And coming back on premises now gives people a bit more control. Technology's moved on. We don't need so many people scattered around the office floor to manage everything that was hard to manage many years ago. And the costs are far more controlled. But it does lead into then what's appropriate for on-premises and what's appropriate for a hyperscaler or an MSP or whatever it might be there. But something we talked about just briefly about the hypervisor, that's, I think, falls into the same camp as the HCI. It's just been there. It's been around for many years. And in some ways, some of the technical communities have made a living out of it as being administrators and got the certifications. And I was absolutely one of those. And I absolutely enjoyed all that.
Yep, same here.
However, it's just something that sits there nowadays. We don't know or don't care how AWS or Azure, Alibaba, Google Cloud, what they run as a hypervisor. All we focus about is workloads on top and the performance of those and the correct locations as well.
No, that makes sense. And I think that's where we've got to really re-educate the market around the capabilities around, like you said, if you're just going to lift a bunch of workloads from one location and put them in another, you just swap one problem for another problem. If you haven't changed that operating model, then 1,000 workloads are still going to interact in the same way.
Yeah.
And all the challenges aren't necessarily a platform challenge, they're an application level challenge. So cost, complexity, I think possibly some hasty decisions in the early days of public cloud, like you say, sold on the golf course type dreams, which are great. And I think it's great that we're seeing these cloud first strategies now be more cloud appropriate strategies. And I think it was only 18 months ago or so ago that Microsoft finally stood on stage and said that not every workload will end up in Azure. Every workload might end up on a Microsoft platform, but that might be things like Stack HCI and stuff like that as an alternative. But for the hyperscalers now to be saying not everything is suitable for public cloud, at least we're getting a bit more of a consistent message across the board.
And I guess also just on that consistent message, it's evidencing that they have to embrace and be mature about the real world of workloads. Initially, it was, you have to come to us and we'll do everything for you. But we know that's not the case. You can't virtualize equipment that's maybe in a manufacturing plant, which has physical devices installed on it because it's controlling, very bespoke equipment to build, cars or whatever.
Yep.
That's going to never go into the public cloud.
Indeed. So I guess now we know that there are real core reasons why things are going to be in multiple different locations, whether they're on-prem, at the edge, in the public cloud, etc. I think for this transformation conversation, or the conversation I'm having a lot, and I know you're having it as well, Darren, is obviously the elephant around the Broadcom acquisition and the unrest that stirred into what was a relatively stable market for a long time now. And I think it's interesting when we look at the technical aspect of that and we say, hey, Darren, how quickly can you move 100 VMs from platform A to platform B? And the answer to that is probably in minutes with today's technology, with little disruption, quick reboot, and away we go. I think that is understating the overall challenge, though. I don't know what your thoughts are there on actually what the real focus should be if we're thinking about a shift in platform. It's not just about can we migrate a VM.
Yeah, migration in its own right is a very far-reaching topic. You said about the technical side, you're absolutely right. We can shift things. Most vendors can just shift things from one platform to another quite quickly. However, the impact doesn't consider the business and operational processes, how it's going to service their customers. Everything, the IT bit is easy. There's always tooling. There's ways to move things around. But when we look at, we are business analysts involved and start doing service mapping, worked out all the independencies and the interlocks of how everything functions. That's why transformation, migration projects, all these take a very long time in certain instances. And the stories we hear where people have chosen to migrate maybe to a hyperscaler and they've only done a handful of VMs over a year because the impacts are far-reaching on the business side. How do you schedule downtime? What about all the third-party tooling that's plugged into monitoring all these applications? That's got to be considered. And the list goes on. And
data protection, integrations, change control processes, reskilling of staff. The list goes on, and I think people have to be very cautious of not taking a knee-jerk reaction to this change in the market that's happened in the last month or so, and wait for the realities to settle down and consider what that total cost of ownership is likely to be over the next 3 years potentially, because we could end up with another set of knee-jerks like early cloud adoption that lead to repatriation requirements or changing directions, and they could be far more costly than doing nothing while you wait for the market to settle down. I mean, that's from that side of it, because that complexity of change, that cost of change can be huge and need to be mapped out in some detail, I think.
Yeah, and that knee-jerk reaction you said about, certainly we've heard more than one instance now with the elephant in room announcements and the concern of using a single vendor. The only option is to go to public cloud, and we've heard of that as a response, and that's not the case. And I don't want customers to feel like they only have one choice. There's many out there.
Yeah,
it just takes time to review the options.
Indeed, and I think that multi-hypervisor choice, potentially multi-cloud approach, becomes even more prevalent when we worry about where the hyperscaler costs might go in the future. We saw during COVID that they're not unlimited resources and the outages and challenges that happened there. We've seen now what's happened with VMware, something that was a massive stable stalwart in the ecosystem for a long time now. I think single vendor technology becomes a challenge going forwards, but that's an interesting model that if we end up on the Nutanix hardware, hardware's the wrong software platform, get the right wording there, actually we have a choice of hypervisor then. Do we use AHV? Do we use VMware? And actually we're not locked in to that. Our hardware choice and our software management platforms, storage management platforms, things don't lock us into a hypervisor, which gives us choice in the future, gives us bargaining power.
Absolutely. Flexibility, that's the other one. So in the case of looking to consume to an end of a licensing period with an existing hypervisor vendor, that time is the opportunity to be exploring other options rather than waiting to the last 6 months and then having that mad panic. So look at other areas where maybe you can run the current hypervisor that's deployed on maybe another platform. Can you transition to another hypervisor? Is that something that can help? Whilst I said earlier on, it's not about the hypervisor. In this case, unfortunately, it is the building block. We have to consider, but how do we make that transition as smooth as possible? I think
it's that transition over time. And you mentioned proof later on, proving that the new platform can deliver the levels of stability, capability, operational need, etc. And we know that they can because we've done it multiple times for our customers.
Of course.
But as a new customer that's maybe been in a single ecosystem for a long time, that's a big change. And they're not going to want to take that business risk in one go. And you don't want to be squashed up against a renewal where you're forced to do something you shouldn't do. So it's about assessing them options as early as possible, looking at that transition over time, and actually as a platform where you can run both gives you that chance to do that slower transition versus having to make a big bang.
And that's something we major on heavily within our organisation. We have done that for years, notwithstanding we have supported other hypervisors as well, but we know the world has been dominated by one, and we have another option there, and we can kind of smooth that transition through.
Options is an interesting one because we talk about where do we go if we don't stay on existing hypervisor platforms. And you mentioned it before that there is this leap to public cloud, seen as the only option in the market.
Yeah.
And we see that when we talk to customers about building clouds and cloud operating models and cloud features, they think then that their only place to go is the hyperscalers to achieve them outcomes. And I think understanding them options is really key, and making sure you don't make a choice for the wrong reason for that side of it. And I think that's probably the segue into part two, really, which is what are the options for building clouds these days, and what features and functions can you get in different locations so that you can make the best commercial and operational choices for your organization.
And we need to define also what is a cloud. I think that's the important part. Let's get that conversation kicked off in that manner. That'll be a really good start.
Sounds good. Thanks for listening, everyone. I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist for CDW.
And I've been Darren Woollard, Field CTO for Nutanix.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.